Welcome everybody to our October member meeting. It's a beautiful day, ain't it? Nice to not see the rain for sure after 6 days. Sorry about last month. For those who came and returned away, I heard Howard had some donuts for people. So just to let people know, that error was not on. That error was on their part. So we had the date reserved, and for some reason they double booked it, and they didn't let us know that they had double booked it. Do that again.
We all check our email 10 times before the game.
I didn't know about it, so I apologize. The first one I knew about, and it was my error. So the first one was a couple months ago, was my error, but last month was their error, and we were a little worried about today when Stephanie and Patrick came and saw the tent, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, they're having a party for us today."
You didn't have it all?
No, we didn't have it last month. Last month was the one we canceled. September. Oh, that's a good question. That's an excellent question. Paul, Paul knows the location better than I do. So we're moving the location for our winter meetings, which start next month. So we do 6 months indoors and 6 months outdoors. So November, December, January, February, March, April are indoors.
And it'll be at Saints Philip and James in Exton. So that's a Catholic church. It's on Route 30. It's just 1 mile east of the intersection of 130. So it's just a mile different from West Whiteland Township building. So it's on the left as you're going east. And we got the school cafeteria. We have a kitchen, and it's a bunch of tables and benches. So I think it'll be comfortable enough. It has internet, so we'll see how it goes. Right across the street. Yeah. So yeah, it's at that intersection of Ship Road and Route 30. So the Ship Inn is on one corner. The thrift shop, Philip and James Thrift Shop, is right across Ship Road from that. And then the church is in back of that, and a school. So it's big and rambling. So you want to go to the far east parking lot.
And how much are we paying for that?
Zero. I'm a good
So
parishioner.
Paul gets a gold star for that effort for sure. So just to be, I'm a big believer in transparency. So just so people know, we had our last indoor meeting with West Whiteland. They've accused us of scratching up their carpet with our table or chair somehow, and they never really loved us there to begin with. But I think that the straw that broke the camel's back. So we ended up, I think we're going to pay that bill. It's not much, but we'll say, okay, we did it, even though I don't think we did it. But we decided that location wasn't ideal for us because, we're beekeepers. We're not corporate, kind of sit behind a desk and push papers around. We like to bring propolis hives in and eat our coffee and donuts, and so that's what we want to do. So we decided that we were going to look for a new place to have our winter fun, and this location's really good. The parking lot's right outside the cafeteria, so it's easy to get from the parking lot to the cafeteria. They have
As you park, you're facing the cafeteria.
They have a nice ramp there.
You don't have to go in the front of the church. Just go in the cafeteria the side, unless you want to pray.
Yeah, you can pray while you're there. Pray for. We're gonna, if I can find.
Yeah, we can figure that out.
Yes, and the other, it's a much bigger space. So when we do our breakout rooms, we'll be able to move around. And again, it's a nice if we want to have some kind of food beyond coffee and donuts. They have a full scale kitchen there, so it's really nice. So this isn't the first indoor stop, and it won't be the last indoor stop for the CCBA probably, but it seems to be the price is right for sure. Yeah.
So it'll be from
and they
November.
Want us.
So it'll be the second Thursday of every month, except for December. So in December it'll be the 15th.
The third Thursday. And it's a Thursday evening. We generally we gather from 6:30 to 7, and we start at 7. And we'll be done at 9:30-ish. So that's the goal. And hopefully everybody will come out. And I think it'll work well, honestly. You know,
Yep. What's the question?
the dress.
Oh, we can publish that in the newsletter.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you right now,
So that's the news about.
it's East Lancaster Ave. St. Philip and James Church.
It looks like the only difference is it's not chairs. There's like, you know, if you go, remember in grade school, we went to the cafeteria, they had these tables that sat like 8 or 10 people, you know, you have to sit next to your buddy and, you know, that's kind of the setup. So we'll be sitting at tables instead of chairs, but it'll be a good place to put your coffee, your donuts and.
How many people does it take?
Oh, it'll take
Hundreds.
well over 100.
Yeah, I mean, you probably could put 300 or 400 people in that space easily. So, you know, if we wanted to do a bigger event or if you wanted, you know, potentially, I mean, it definitely could accommodate the space is huge. Yeah, it's nice, actually, really nice.
Well, this says 107 North Ship Road, but I don't think that's right. I think the real address is Lancaster Ave. Anyway, we'll send that around.
So that's the, yes,
Accommodate.
probably. I mean, you probably could do it if you just had one room, because you probably could put a couple hundred people in that cafeteria. I don't know what the fire code number is, but it's huge, you know. But as far as break, you know, like having a beginner and an intermediate and advanced track, I don't know if they have other rooms at that school that could be used. And the
No,
parking's not.
No, there's not gonna be
huge.
any other
It's
room.
probably not gonna be right for that.
Yeah, we just have access to the downstairs
Yeah,
cafeteria, the,
I had to talk to the
There's
priest about
bathrooms
putting some
down there.
hives at the church. That'd be kind of cool, right? If to have some hives there, you know. But anyway, that's that news about the meeting space.
Yep.
The other news that's coming up is we plan on doing the fondant purchase again this year. So I've yet to do that, Jack. I gotta call the goods place and see what the price of fondant is. Well, we usually get 90. That's a good question because I need some help on this one, right? So we usually get 90-10 fondant, but last year we had 2 pallets of 90-10 and a pallet of 80-20 because they ran out of 90-10. And some people actually said they preferred the 80-20 because it was a little softer or a little easier to work. You know, I think that's the ratio of sugar to corn syrup, I believe, corn water. Fondant? I think corn syrup. I think it's. So does anybody, I think the 80-20 is a little cheaper than the 90-10. Does anyone have strong preferences if we order 90-10 or 80-20 or it doesn't really matter?
well, we ought to know what it is.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not the detail guy, Paul. You know, I just,
What did we order last month? I mean, last year.
we usually order 90-10, but last year we ordered a pallet of 80-20 because they ran out of 90-10.
Oh.
And some people actually preferred the 80-20 because it was easier to cut,
Oh, okay.
because it was softer. And some people said the bees took it better because it was softer, but I don't know. So I'll see what they got. So what we usually do, which I assume we'll do this year, is we will put it. I assume the price is going to be more. You know, we've gotten the fondant for about $33 or $34 a 50-pound block in the past. I think it's up over $50 a 50-pound block right now. I don't know if that's going to impact the amount of people that are interested in buying the fondant, but we will put it as soon as I confirm that we can order it and what the price is. We'll put, and usually in the past we've bought two pallets. I guess we'll do the same this year. So we'll put the stuff on the storefront. You can go ahead and pre-purchase it on the storefront, and then if we sell out 2 pallets, then we'll try to get a 3rd pallet. Is kind of how we do it. Yes. John.
90/10 is 90% street crews, 10% crews.
Oh, I was right. Pulled that one out of the air. So the 80/20 is just more corn syrup and less sucrose. I don't know if people care, if the bees care. Do the bees care? Don't they overwinter better on sugar than corn syrup, I hear, but I don't think it makes a difference. So we may go with, if the 80/20 is a little cheaper, we may go with 80/20 just because I want to save people a few bucks, you know, but I assume it's going to be more. I forget the member who helped me out last year, and I need to look into that because someone helped me out transport this stuff. So we need to, so you'll see an email coming out at 2:00 in the morning
He had
about.
a forklift, right?
Yeah, he had a forklift and a huge truck, so he had the ideal scenario to move this stuff, so. Anyway, so that fondant's coming,
Thing at your house, weekend.
the candy board, absolutely, so. The candy board making will be the Saturday before Thanksgiving, where we all sit around and drink and make a bunch of candy boards that don't set up, that drain all over the place, and you know, the annual candy board making event. We'll talk more candy board. So that'll be coming up, and that's always that. But you know, the year's winding down, so we don't have a whole lot of things going on, but those are the two things coming up. And usually the fondant's available sometime in November. So again, you know, you could plan on that. Your hive shouldn't need fondant right now, but we'll get into that. The other news is that, as most of you know, I'm stepping down as president at the end of the year. It's been 3 years of fun, but it's time for me to pass this on to the next president. So next month we have our board of director elections, right? So that's our annual board elections where we have a seven-member board who sort of makes sure that the club continues to sort of operate and meet its mission. Obviously that's important. There are 2 seats that are up this year for re-election or for election. The current board members that their seats are up is Jack McMichael, our treasurer, and Warren Graham. And I don't know if Jack's our current chairperson of the board. So I don't know if Jack or Warren are going to rerun or not this year. So we definitely need as many people who have interest in serving on the board as possible to run. So we need at least 2 people to run for those 2 positions. So I try to encourage everybody, if you have any interest in being on the board, the commitment is we meet 4 times a year. It's Jack can tell you what the commitment is. He's chairperson.
As George said, that the board is meets 4 times a year. The board does not get involved in the day-to-day activities of the club. It's, you know, sets strategic direction and just takes a look at the club from a very high level and makes some decisions when necessary about important things that come up. So it's not a big commitment on anybody that would be interested in being a board member at all.
Right, but it's an important piece of how we operate. And again, the board was created about 7 or 8 years ago by Merle when he was president. And I think it allows some continuity of the leadership of the club going forward, right? Because the officers can change every year, but the board is sort of more consistent. So
It's a 3-year term.
it's a 3-year, yeah.
And you can serve 2 consecutive 3-year terms, and then you've got to step out for 3 years and then come back in.
Is anyone here interested in being on the board? You're already on the board.
And I have not talked to Warren yet, so I don't know if he's planning on running for re-election. And I am undecided as to whether I'm gonna
Go, Jack.
run for another year.
Get a chairman.
Right, but I'm also the treasurer and wear several other hats with the club and have a life outside the club as well.
So Jack is uncommitted if he's going to run again. We all got to tell Jack to run again. Obviously, a key. What?
All those in favor?
All those in favor say aye. Okay. Who needs the election in November? You know. Thanks, Jack.
That was very nice, but the election's not till November, so none of that counts.
So that's
In additional full disclosure, I'm going to be stepping down as vice president. So you can put your hat to Jack as chairman of the board if you would like to become a vice president.
Yeah, so this is gonna.
I've only served for 5 years.
And Mark's,
That's not enough.
and Mark's just sitting there not saying anything, so we're not sure. So this is gonna be I don't know. I mean, the club's been around since 1946 or 7, and there's been many presidents and many transitions, and this is just the next transition. But I'm speaking to 20 or 30 people I know, and not 600 people, which the club has, right? So 700
704 primary members.
704 primary members of this club. We need somebody to be president for sure, and we need officers below that. And I'm willing, and I'm willing to help, and the board's willing to help, but I really don't want to do this job from January 1st. Was that recorded, Mark?
It sounded like a step back to me.
A step back? Anyway, what's the good? Well, what's the good about being president of this club? Well, you get to meet the membership is 700 people. It's so diverse. There's a lot of beekeepers are nice. I mean, my wife says it. She says, you're all wacky, but you generally tend to be nice. I was like, okay, that about sums up beekeepers. We're a bit odd, but but if you ask a beekeeper generally for some help, they'll help you out. So the other good thing is that the club is really, so it's got a nice membership base. It's got a nice financial base. What I think we have, between our operating and our Save the Bees and our this and our that, I think they're probably close to $70,000 in financial assets. So if you have things you want to do, so I don't know how I suck at marketing and I suck at sales, but there you go. Anyone thinking about being president or have any interest in being president? Okay.
You don't need to be experienced.
You don't. And I say, and people say, well, as far as, I've been at the club, I don't know, 10 or 12 years. Cindy Faulkner was president when I started, and then Cindy went to Keith, and Keith was definitely different than Cindy. And then Keith went to Merle, and Merle's definitely different than Keith. And then Keith took it back again. And then I took it from, I succeeded Keith. So we're all different. We all have different strengths and we all bring different things to the club. So whoever's next president is going to be different than me. And that's okay. It's probably a good thing, honestly, because, the club's going to continue to evolve. Sheena wants to be president. Thank you. You raise your hand. Okay. All in favor? All right.
Get that in a minute.
Sure we do.
We don't need all the time. I'll be too silly. Okay, I was gonna say, it might be helpful if you, whenever you roll, what, you talked about what's good about it.
What's bad? What's it?
I mean, your day-to-day job is to sort of execute the vision of the club, which is to educate beekeepers and to educate beekeepers and help people share the art of beekeeping and run meetings. And I mean, that's really what that looks like. I don't take anything and go 20% or 30%. That's just not who I am. I take something and go 100%, and I throw a bunch of shit up against the wall and hopefully it all sticks, but not that it all sticks. And that's just the way I run my life, and that doesn't mean the next president has to run it similarly, I mean, so it's, you can take what it is and make it whatever you want it to be, I mean, right? I mean, I think, what do you think, Keith? You've done this job for 4 years. It is.
No, you can do that.
He's got both hands gripped onto his coffee. How many hours do I spend on this a week? Depends on the week, you know, depends on the week, honestly, you know. The key is the key is to delegate. The key is to, you know, try to get your core. I've been very fortunate to have a whole bunch of really good people running committees and really good people as officers, and I still put my hand in too much, unfortunately, or fortunately, but that's the key. And you have 700 people, and you have to convince the 700 people someone else ain't going to do it, right? I mean, I was sitting back there, someone else will do it, you know, and there's 700 people, but if nobody does it, then it'll be what it'll be. It'll be not the premier club it's been over the last, you know, long time, right? I mean, there's no way we're going to continue to be the premier club if someone doesn't step up and be president. Or any of the other roles in the club, the plant committee, the conference committee, the queen committee, the education committee, the community engagement, all the things that we do is done because there's other people helping me, you know, with the spaghetti that sticks up against the wall. So, but it does, there's no, it can be whatever that person wants it to be, right? I mean, Merle had a different vision and Keith had a different vision and I had a different vision and we all ran things differently. You know, we all were trying to educate people how to become good beekeepers, but we all did it differently, you know? So the next person's going to do it differently. Whoever that next person is, January 1st.
It's not, I just want to ask, like,
Prompt the discussion. Any other questions? There's no salary, unfortunately, you know. You do get a lot of stuff dropped off at your house, though, you know, like when people leave being beekeepers, they drop stuff off at your house. I guess that could be a benefit. You get to, I don't know.
Just to clarify, you don't have to accept everybody dropping their stuff off.
That is correct.
That is correct. Somebody in the bar.
Fun hop.
Buzz off. Exactly.
Other questions about the role of being president? I'm a little worried. I'm a little worried, but somebody will step up and want to do it.
We have had people step up, the people who prepared to put their name forward.
Oh, good. Okay. I don't know them, but that's good.
You do know them.
Well, I don't know who they are, so that's good that they want to do it. So that's good news. So that's reassuring for sure. I don't have to worry as much that
That's one of the kids, that he really knows some of them.
I know one name. One name has been communicated.
cool.
Hey, if you know someone who would be a good president, you can nominate.
The decision on who president goes through the board. So the board,
You can certainly
yeah, you can nominate anybody you want.
Tell a board member that you feel so close to be the president.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for, that's great. I was a little worried, but it sounds like there's some interest out there, which is great. Thank you. Anyway, so other questions? No. So let's move on to what we're doing with our bees, Paul.
What are we doing with our bees? Well, probably don't have to explain anything to this crowd, but you know, we have mites, food, mice, and winter. So you should be treating for the mites now because you want to knock the mite level down to zero or as close to zero as possible so they can go in healthy into winter. You want to have enough food available so they can make it through the winter. So you should be feeding 2-to-1 sugar syrup now. So your goal is to, by the end of October, bring your hives up to 100 pounds. That would be a double deep configuration. They need to be about 100 pounds. If anybody needs to know how to weigh, you can buy a hook scale at Harbor Freight. And this is ostensibly for like big fish or something like that, but it has a hook and it's a spring scale, has a hook on the bottom. You hook it into the bottom of your lower deep and you lift it up on the side and you look at the weight. Then you put it on the other side, on the other hook, put the hook in the other handhold on the other side, lift that up and look at that weight. Add those two weights and that's the hive weight. So we're aiming for 100 pounds,
How much is the scale that's on the front?
probably $10.
Walmart has one.
All right, go to Walmart. Walmart doesn't have, at least the one in Exton, does not have sugar,
Not as Pete's been there.
but no, they've been back ordered forever.
I just,
They've been back ordered for so long that the shelf says 35 cents a pound. And you know that's not right. So I found it in like Audubon, a Walmart in Audubon, and it was about 70 cents. Yeah, all right. What it cost. And where?
Parksburg. 30.
Parksburg? Oh, okay. All right. There you go. So anyway, but by the end of October, you want to have them up to about 100 pounds. It's going to be reasonably warm this week, but it is getting colder. The problem is if it goes below 50, they can't evaporate the water. So you want to feed them at night, and so they don't go crazy, because everybody knows if you run around a bee yard with an open pail of sugar, you're going to get attacked, and it just stirs them all up. So let them all get in their hives before you feed them. I like to feed them in a top feeder, which is a big trough feeder, and but you can feed them with a frame feeder. That means you get exposed to the bees. The trough feeder on top means you don't get exposed to the bees. So it just sits on top of the upper deep or the upper super. I like to put a super on too.
So here's two, I have two frame feeders,
Yeah, that's a frame feeder.
so everyone familiar?
Those
They're
work.
frame feeders.
And if really get desperate, you can use a cottage cheese container. So plastic cottage cheese containers, just simply invert them and punch holes just above the lid, around the bottom, about 6 or 8 holes. And the sugar seeps out of there and holds up in the little well that's created by the lid. So, you know, you can use a pint or a quart cottage cheese container filled with 2-to-1 syrup. You just put that on top of the inner cover. Put those on top of the inner cover and then surround it with a shallow super, and then put your cover, your outer cover on top of that. So that's a good way of feeding the bees if you need some containers.
And one other way of feeding bees, 2-to-1 syrup in a plastic sandwich baggie, lay it on the inner cover, take a razor, just lightly skin across the plastic.
I've never been brave enough to try that.
I've done it. I did it a number of times, but like if I've got too many hives and I don't have enough feeders, I just do that. And within 3 or 4 days, that plastic bag is empty. And you can see the bees kind of going, well, there was stuff here. The problem with refilling it depends on how much of that razor slice you put on. Because when you fill it, if there's a razor slice in it, it'll just then it will pour out all over. Small cut or a very light couple of cuts.
So this is a freezer bag,
No, it could be a sandwich bag.
sandwich bag,
You're gonna
With
take
2
a
to
long
1.
time to bring your.
2 to 1.
and just a little bit of slice.
Yep. No,
And
but
it
you can
doesn't
put like-
immediately gush out.
No, it does not. And you can put, George, you can put 4 or 5 bags on an inner cover. That's
How much can you put, how much volume can you put in a bag?
Well,
Without it leaking?
1 gallon bag, you could.
Without it leaking all over the bees?
Just a
Yeah, it
little
doesn't
cut.
leak. It doesn't. If 2
You
to
heard
1 won't leak.
You heard it here.
1 to 1, I guarantee you, 1 to 1 is not good in a plastic bag.
No,
Because it'll-
I would assume it
that
would
will
just come
gush.
out the top and down onto your.
Yeah, you can do small steps, don't do.
Yeah, you don't, yeah, just kind of tap it. As long as there's, as long
You
as
put
there's
a
a place.
gallon of liquid in a.
Again, I
plastic.
use sandwich bags.
I want to know who's
So-
put a gallon of liquid in a bag on top of a colony. Yes?
It works.
Okay.
All right.
Say that again. In this? Yes,
That's a gallon.
I'll take this.
The baggie, yeah, I use that, I didn't.
You're putting gallon bags on all your hives, Keith?
But you have to have a shim.
You have to have space, right? Especially if you're putting a gallon in a Ziploc bag, you need a shim. I'm gonna try it today. Watch CCBA forum Facebook site.
You need a big shim.
You need a big shim and really, really thick liquid that's almost like solid.
Or garden cover, which is what I run. I run mostly garden covers.
Right.
I got a lot of room on top above the
Yeah.
air cover.
You're gonna put a gallon in a Ziploc bag over a cluster. I don't believe it.
He does it all the time.
He does Ziploc. He does the sandwich bag.
I don't use gallon fish egg. I've been done. I've seen it.
Why can't you put a nail hole? Good.
Yeah.
You could
That seems like a deal.
Gold instead of a slit.
instead of a slit.
Yeah. Several people.
Yeah, and then how long does it take the bees to empty that out?
Try it all,
2 or
report
3
back
days.
next
Really?
month.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, everyone's gonna go home and try this. You're gonna get a gallon Ziploc bag. You're gonna fill it up with a gallon. Put it on top of your hive.
Yes,
Sorry.
Back. Put on,
yeah, you can do that.
how do you go that?
I've done it and I dilute it a little bit for ease of pouring. And then I dump it in that, the trough feeder on top. It goes right away.
Your honey, not perfect.
Yeah, your honey.
Yeah, I have a
Yeah.
bunch of honey that sort of crystallized.
Mhm.
Right.
I should, the problem with eating honey is from the.
Yeah.
So this might be an ideal time to do it.
Yeah.
I put honey, no done. Put it in a frame for you.
Yeah,
I would, one of those. Get the honey.
oh, okay.
I have the top.
It's best in a top feeder. Yeah, I've done it. It just disappears. Yeah. Okay, so mice food, mice. So mice can get into anything smaller than a half an inch. So put a mouse guard on now. I like the ones that have holes in them, stainless steel, or you can make your own out of aluminum or just small animal screening, rat wire we used to call it. That's hardware cloth. Yeah. And anyway, keep the mice out and get it on now before they feel like getting established. And then finally, winterization. So like I said, I'm feeding with a super on top now. So I have 2 deeps and a super. So at the end of October, I'll take that super and I'll move it down. So my configuration for winter will be screen bottom board. And I put the sticky board underneath, but I cut a trap door in the sticky board. So I cut a square, maybe 3 inches on 3 sides, and I bend it down. So if you bend it down, then you have a little ventilation. It's not going to blow up much. Bend the trapdoor down against the prevailing wind. So anyway, screen bottom board. That's for all the mites to drop through. And I like a slatted rack. A slatted rack gives you a little more buffer area to prevent those cold winds from swirling around. So the slatted rack, and then I'll put the first deep on. I'll move the brood down into the, if there's any brood left, I'll move the brood down. Second deep, that'll be all the sugar syrup. And then, oh, I forgot the super. So above the slatted rack, I put the super.
You have a piece drawn down.
No.
So the queen could be laying in the soup.
Yeah.
But now you take the,
But I've never seen one lay in the super this late in the year.
and then you potentially you take the brood to the bottom. And then the custard could be held away from the.
Check your super for brood before you put it down.
Take your
But by the
medians
end of
off your
October,
hive now.
By the end of October, I think they're done.
I put the soup at the bottom.
yeah, I learned it from you. Yeah. So screen bottom board, slatted rack, super full of honey. First deep that has the remnants of brood. Second deep that has the sugar syrup. And then I'll put a spacer on top That's where I put my old hunting socks and blankets to absorb any excess condensation. And you can also feed on the screen spacer in the winter if you want. I don't like candy boards myself, but other people do. And
Probably doesn't make too much of a difference what you use candy.
and then you
boards
need
on.
insulation. So you need two blue boards of insulation or one pink board of insulation. And then finally your outer cover. Yes,
Well, what happens to the honey in that,
right now they'll run around and eat it. But later in the winter, they're gonna go up above it. So you just have wasted honey and wasted space. Some years they consume it all before they move up. Other years they don't.
you ever move it?
Do they move it? Yeah, they can move it.
They move
Yeah.
to where they think they're gonna be.
Yeah. So it's just an extra little reservoir for them to play around with it.
I do the same configuration, I checked. And I can tell you how much it's gone. Most of the hive is gone,
But sometimes it's still there.
but I don't know where it went.
Oh. They can move it up or they can start eating down there. They can start eating down. There. What did you say? Who ate it?
The hive beetle.
I've been.
What is Georgia selling hive people to his house?
Do we want a hive beetle update today? You know, I can give you a hive beetle update, but you know, only if you're interested.
I want Sheena to explain to the group here how she got 10,000 beetles in her hive. That'll be later.
What did I see people get on?
Because you don't know how to find them. They're there. They're in every single hive. They're in every.
I just got a flock that moved into one of my longwood hives. I've seen like two. I have a little. I have a little oil hive beetle trap. So it has beer in the middle and then oil on the sides. I get 2, 3, 4 rarely, every week or two. And I went in there the other day and I had 50 hive beetles in there. So that was a flock from Georgia's that was migrating north.
I'm bringing them up from up south. I gotta infestate this Chester County with hive beetles.
I was astounded. So anyway, they tell me they move in flocks. So
I have this guy named
Swans.
Jamie Ellis in Florida who breeds them.
yeah,
And I go down there once a month and get a container of them and let them go near Keats apiaries, It's like, here, fly. My job is done. I've got hive beetles everywhere. I'm good.
ready to sell those.
Ready to sell those traps.
He says he doesn't know anything about marketing.
Create the need,
Yeah, bees move up over the winter. So they'll eat their way up. The cluster will eat their way up over the winter. So they're always moving up. Heat rises, they rise, they eat the honey.
But on a bigger continent, it doesn't matter.
And then probably in November or December, I'll put a tar paper wrap around the hives. So anyway, that's it for my winterization.
So,
In November or December, is there like a?
Mostly it's when I get around to it. Where's the- Yeah.
The March is when February, March, when they're open food stuff. And they don't want to
Yeah.
compromise, because they're gonna build, they're gonna do for 10. So they need everybody.
Yeah.
A lot of people are taking them off in March and April.
Yeah.
That's when you find the ability to keep it on.
Yeah,
Because
that's right.
That's one of the critical things. People are taking every.
But it's amazing how much a little tar paper, black tar paper will heat up that hive. Just you put your hand inside the tar paper and you can feel the difference in the heat. So it does keep them nice and cozy.
It's not essential, but it's.
It's a windbreak at least, and at best it heats up solar heat.
and then your hives are swarming in April because they're too big.
Okay, listen, you can add as well, that, again, we look at every side of the argument, so if you put tar paper on now, or they have tar paper on, and the bees don't have sufficient resources. So,
Yeah.
Tar paper will encourage them to get bigger consumer business. But generally, we want
Yeah.
them to be.
Plus, if you think of going into the hive at all, you don't want tar paper on there, because you have to rip that off too. So
I mean, right
that's why I
now, like,
wait till late.
you're running out of time to feed liquid, right? So generally it's the end of October, depending on weather, maybe a little bit into November, and then it gets too cold to liquid feed. So, I think that the way I like the liquid feed generally is, well, I don't liquid feed much, but if I did, it would be this top feeder. Why? Because you could put a ton of liquid in there and, they could consume it. So this is, I don't know how many gallons, but 4 gallons. So 4 gallons is 30 pounds of liquid. That's plenty, honestly. So you fill this once and they have enough, for me, they have enough food for the winter because I'm running single beach through the winter. So the problem with this is when it gets to now or later October and you get cold night, this will chill out. So all the liquid in this will get colder and then they may not feed it. So the later you are in October, the better off you are with probably one of these inside the hive, because it's going to benefit from being inside the hive and being warmer. They don't hold as much, but, and then you generally keep this on the outside of your top box, right? So you just put this on the outside. So when you open up your hive, all you do is you move the inner cover or you move your migratory cover over a little bit, and then you can feed right in here without exposing yourself to all the bees. So, and then remember, this has got to come out. So you don't leave this in the hive through the winter because it's just dead airspace. And it can't have liquid in it through the winter, right? That's even worse. So you got to remember, like, sometime in November when you take your apple bar out, right? Because the apple bar has got to come out in end of October, November. Take these out too, and just put. If you have honey frames stored up, great. If not, just put frames back in. So these have to come out. But these are probably better right now when it starts to get colder at night, because the bees will take the sugar from this better than they will take from this. Yeah. Someone mentioned on Bee Chat last night, which is the first time I heard, Mike Landry, who's out in Oklahoma, who's a commercial beekeeper out there. He was talking about bucket feeders, and he was saying they tend to leak syrup when it gets cold. I had never heard of that, but he was saying that these become dangerous this time of year because
The get really cold and then this is the liquid through them. So those are normally reserved for spring feeding.
right.
One way to combat that is you take aluminum foil and wrap it around, and it prevents that, especially when they've done half of it. But it's definitely can kill your colony.
Right. So he was saying that this may be a no-no this time of year unless you really know what you're doing, which was news to me. That was something I learned on Bee Chat last night, that I never used them, but I know people that do, but they said don't use this time of year, which was good advice, because you don't want to pour liquid on your colony in October. Probably a bad idea.
Hey, George?
Yes, sir.
What about taking that bucket, moving it about couple hundred feet from your hive, and putting a handful of hay or something inside the bucket and maybe.
Yeah,
That's
so
a lazy bee.
that's called open feeding. So basically you mix up everyone should get a 5-gallon bucket, right? Even if you have 3 hives, you're gonna run through a 5-gallon bucket of sugar water. So just get a 5-gallon bucket and mix it up with some hot water and mix up your 2-to-1. And yeah, some people will take this bucket, sit it out in the yard, put hay or put some sort of styrofoam float inside of it and just open feed. The thought is that the strong colonies benefit and the weak colonies may not, or the ones with a stronger
The
workforce.
stronger gets stronger, the weaker, and you're feeding your neighbors as well.
Well, yellow jackets.
But
Yeah, that's
and it's quite the sight.
Yeah.
If you want to freak out your neighbors.
And the best thing that Tony said is far away from the hives. Because if you have this open feeder near the hives and you try to go near this, you're gonna die.
I have an interesting story. So this year, after I've extracted my supers, right? So I have all these sort of extracted supers and they're on the back of my truck, right? So those of you know where I live and where my hives are. So I take my truck and I pull it out to where my hives are and just let the truck there, right? And let the bees clean up the truck. And with the keys in it running, right? With the keys running and the hives and all these, there's like 20 supers in the back, and somebody actually called my neighbor and told my neighbor that they thought I was in trouble. and is he okay, or is he in the truck? I said, and Kath was like, maybe that's not the right place for it to put the truck to have the bees clean up the supers. I was like, yeah, it's probably got some heads turned, So now I park my truck in my backyard and clean it up that way. Yeah. But open feeding, I can see the benefit of it, potential, because it's easy, right? Keith said lazy beekeeping, but someone takes the honey, right? Someone takes the sugar syrup. It goes somewhere for sure, But again, it may not be helping the hives that really need it the most. So that's the downside to it.
And if you run out of 50-degree days, I mean, days that are above 50, then don't worry, you can always buy fondant and feed them in over the winter.
Yeah, because as Paul said, the bees move up in the winter. So they always need food kind of over their head, otherwise they're going to starve. So that's what the role of emergency feed is. So you always have food right above where they are. Now, I personally think I expect my hives to only consume about, like November, December, January, they're only going to consume about 5 to 8 pounds of honey a month in those months. At least the colonies I run consume about 5 to 8 pounds of. So basically from November through January, they're only going to eat about 15 pounds of stores. And most hives have 15 pounds of stores in. Then February come and brooding starts and the temperature raises and they got to keep it at 9 degrees and then they got to feed larvae. They'll probably triple that. So February and March, they're going to consume about 15 pounds each month in general. So what you're looking at is a total, in my mind, if I can get 40 to 45 pounds of stores in my hive, that's enough to make them. Now that's different than what you've heard Paul and other people say, that you want to get your hives up over 100 pounds or 110 pounds. I'm running single deeps through the winter. So I'm hoping I can get my single deeps to about 50 or 60 pounds. And then I'm putting a, 15-pound candy board on top of them. And I expect them to do okay. Again, it's a different management and different, risk, right? I mean, there's a risk benefit of all the management decisions you do. And this is my second year doing this. And, really what you want to have is ideally you want to have 90% survival or better. When you have 90% survival or better going out, coming out of the winter, then whatever management you decided worked, right? At the end of the day. So again,
the other thing you should have been doing is supplementing with pollen patties if you don't see enough pollen in the hive, because the bees actually need the protein to make the winter bees more than they need the sugar. So the winter bees really need, everybody in the hive needs the protein. The nurse bees need it to feed the larvae to make those winter bees. So I have plenty of pollen in my hives. I didn't have that much honey, not that much nectar that they picked up this fall, as far as my location goes, Downingtown. But they have plenty of pollen in there. But if they don't have pollen, just make a pollen patty out of some Ultra B mix powder and in your own honey.
You're feeding the beetles.
Beetles, the pollen patties.
So, an easy way.
Yeah.
good job. Feed those beetles.
Make a small patty. Small patty.
So this is when you go for the easy production, the lazy beekeeper, which is a lot better. You external feed.
Yeah,
So you
you can
take
do
a
that.
pail like this
Yeah.
and you just put the substitute.
Yeah.
And the really interesting thing is that last year we had incredible pollen dearth.
Yeah,
So all my hives went nuts. It looks like it's swarming around the dry pollen feed, and there's no risk for beetles. There's no risk for anything.
Yeah.
And it's really, really easy to do.
no, that's good. I use that myself. I take a big tray like for a potted plant and I put the Ultra B powder in that. And then I put them in my tree house. I have a tree house that the kids have. And the bees find it right away and they'll take it down.
And that's important, putting it in the treehouse, because if you just stick it on, the neighbor's dog will enjoy the pollen.
Will they eat the pollen?
They do.
Oh, really?
Is there a time when the beetles kind of die off? Do they go
Oh,
away?
beetle
No, they
question.
overwinter. They overwinter in the
I
hive.
know beetles.
No, is there-
No, the beetles are basically found their home for the winter by now, so there's no more beetles flying out there. So
Right, that's what I'm getting at. So-
right, so you're not gonna see more incoming beetles at this point. They're basically in wherever they're gonna be. And the question that I have is, do they have other places that they overwinter besides hives? And where, what?
Compost heap.
Not here, no. Too cold.
Yeah, but the compost heap maintains the temperature.
Unless it freezes, compost piles freeze.
Do they freeze?
Mine freezes, I have a.
Really, really big.
Yeah, if you had like a giant one, it may not freeze at the
Yeah,
bottom, but
yeah.
the regular old backyard compost piles freeze.
But in the middle of winter, you go into those big ones, it's steaming hot inside.
Yeah,
So they- they-
Well,
Yeah,
but
yeah, that's where they go. They go in.
They got one that's bigger than a quarter wood. Yeah, that's not for freezing.
At the bottom, how far they go down, I don't know, but I assume that the majority of beetles are found their home in your hives for the winter.
But do the bees manage them?
It's hard right now because what the beetles do, the beetles are okay at 50 degrees,
Oh.
right? Bees don't like it at 50 degrees, but beetles are fine at 50 degrees. So the beetles are hanging on the bottom and outside of the frame where the bees are and just existing there right now. And the bees aren't chasing them as much right now. So it's really hard to get beetles out of your hive right now because the bees are done chasing them pretty much.
A comment from George. To bring up the fact, I mean, we always use the Swiffer pads in the hives
Mhm.
to try and trap the get beetles in.
Mhm.
It seems like it works pretty well. I don't know if anybody's mentioned that.
No, but you can always put Swiffer pads or beetle traps in there. They're not gonna hurt anything, you know. I always say for every 3 beetles you see, there's for every 1 beetle you see, there's 10 you don't. Guarantee you. So if you see 20 beetles running around in your hive, you have 200. If you see 50 beetles in your hive, you have 500. If you see 100 beetles in your hive, you have 1,000. The general carrying, why this is, but there's generally not more than 1,000 beetles in any hive at any time.
Also.
I don't know why that is, but that's when people have done research and done beetle counts in hives, that's usually the max number of beetles in a hive. I don't know why,
Somebody told me.
but they're coming and going all the time. But now they're not going anymore, it's too cold. So they're basically set up shop in your hive. You know, you can fan your hive a little bit and disturb the bees and that may clean them out, but for the most part, they're not gonna cause you trouble over the winter because they're just hanging out on the outside of the cluster. Just like the bees aren't reproducing now, the beetles aren't either. It's too cold, so they're not laying eggs, they're not generating larvae. So the beetles in your hive right now aren't really that much of a big deal for your hive, so. Yeah, you're kind of stuck with what you got right now in your hive.
Well,
It's
usually
hard
I
to
just
get
go
them
one by one. If you kind of hang your frame out to the side,
out. Uh-huh.
you'll see them pouring out. But then that takes like 8 hours to get to all your stuff.
And then what do you do when they start pouring out of the cone?
Well, I just kind of hang out with my hot tool when they get their frame started.
Vacuum cleaner.
Some people suction it with their mouth, you know?
Yeah, no. They can just hang out.
Yeah, no, we you know, the beetles don't like the sun, right? So if you're doing if you really want to know how many beetles you have, look at a frame, hold it in the sun and wait about 30 seconds. And then all of a sudden they'll appear out of the comb and you'll see how many beetles you have in your hive. But anyway, yeah, they're done flying. About 2 weeks ago, they stopped, about a week ago, they stopped flying. And I don't know what that trigger is, but you don't have any more incoming beetles into your hives at this point, so.
will they go into the trap still?
Not as much. Well, Paul had a whole bunch go into his chest, but generally, once it gets colder, they just sort of, the beetles just sort of hang on the outside and the bees don't want to spend the energy to get rid of them. So they just kind of coexist. And you can run, the beetles coexist in your cluster all winter. So they'll exist in your cluster all winter. And as soon as the queen starts to lay, then the beetles start to lay, because the temperature of the hive goes up and the cycle starts over again, right? There's larvae, they go into the earth and now you have thousands of beetles. Anyway, it's not bee.
Sure.
Yeah.
Have you heard if somebody puts their hives on a concrete pad or slab, would help? They'll just come in.
So it's unclear really why the beetles target certain hives, honestly. Like why? Obviously, weak hives are going to be more targeted because they're less defensive. But why do people down south have strong hives that get decimated by beetles? And you're going to see it here too. I really think you're going to start to see it here
Except
now.
the colder our winters, but then it's going to be.
Correct. Right.
But at the moment, beetles are no issue whatsoever for us,
That's not true.
unless you mismanage your colony.
It's not true.
Okay, I don't see them.
Well, that's one
Can I
beekeeper.
give you some of my hives?
But,
Can I give you some of my hives?
no, not so
Ask
much.
that beekeeper.
But that's not true, Keith. You know, there's plenty of there's hive loss around here secondary to beetles. Whether or not they're mismanaged or not, I'm not sure, honestly.
But if you're using some place where the beetles can hide, you know, your hive configuration is in such a way that beetles, the bees can't get them.
Plastic frames have places that they can hide, yeah.
So I'm using all plastic hives that I could.
You've never lost a nuke from a beetle populace,
Never.
problem.
Never.
I don't believe so. But that's okay. Honestly, you know, I mean, we could have different opinions on this, you know, I mean, I think there's people. What?
I never lost a hive to beetles.
We have. I mean, you mean it's so many beetles that the bees die.
Or it's gone. Or it's gone.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It could be your empty hive could be a beetle problem.
Yeah.
You know? And the beetles will eventually leave. So you may go and hide and see nothing and they may be gone. Anyway, before we get too heated about beetles. I love to be heated about beetles. Yes.
And one real quick question. I've been treating with Apivar and I just finished.
Mhm.
Over the period of that 6 weeks,
Mhm.
I've noticed a big drop off in the bean
Mhm.
laying. And I don't know if it's because of the weather or
Right.
or the
Apivar.
Apivar.
No,
So
it's
did
just
I
natural.
experience that?
That's not.
I asked that
I mean,
same.
at this time of year, the queens are starting to play more stimulation.
I love that question.
Everybody said no effect on.
No effect.
I saw the same thing recently. You know, I noticed that when I put Apivar in and went back in and looked, there wasn't as much open brood. And I sort of asked around if there's any evidence that Apivar decreases queen laying, and I couldn't find any or anybody like that. So I figured it was a combination of the change in season and also me not doing. I wait as long as I can to put feed on my hives, you know, so maybe that's part of why I don't see much open brood. But I went through my hives the last 2 days and I was lucky to see maybe a half a frame of open brood in the hives right now. And I kind of scratched my head and wondered if it was Apivar or the rain or the cold. Because it seemed kind of striking to me, you know,
There's plenty of honey in these. hives.
Yeah,
It
no.
was in 2 locations, so
and they're still bringing in pollen, you know,
a lot of pollen.
yeah. But I guess the queen's just naturally shutting down. To me, it seemed a little early too.
Yeah.
Paul,
that's what I
but-
thought.
They're just slowing down slowly.
Does anyone
The queen slowly.
Does anyone know of anything, any evidence about Apivar and queen laying? Anybody?
I'm finding the queen laying right next to the apivar. So often you look for eggs and they within an inch of the apivar strips. So, and the documentation from, I wouldn't but from them says it doesn't do at all. And you can also eat it as long as you don't go over 74 strips at once.
Okay, no one eat Apivar, please. That's a bad idea, unless you want to have neurotoxicity. There was another question? Yes,
So you had a beetle problem, I had a mold problem.
a moth problem.
I have 2 hives, I had 2 hives. What do you think?
What do I think?
You need to strengthen the colony. A strong colony will keep the moths out.
What size is that? Is it a freezing for it?
No.
Yeah.
I don't know of any moth treatment that you can apply inside the hive. I'm not aware. Anybody aware of any in-hive moth treatments, wax moth treatment?
What's that kind of like UT stuff? You think?
That's,
It's up the high.
Okay.
One of the interesting things, if we go back 100 years, one of the major reasons for loss of colonies was the wax moth.
Really?
So it's like they were breeding bees that could keep the wax moth at bay.
So once they're in there,
I guess, get the frames out and that are infested and try to,
Yeah, the answer to that is
Decrease
normally
space. It's all about-
nothing wrong with the hive.
I always think about space. It doesn't get talked about enough. I mean, we all want big hives and we all want stacks that big, but I feel like it can lead to problems if you don't adequately manage space in your hive. It's one of the things that I think doesn't get talked enough about, like have your hive space match your colony size. Otherwise, you're gonna you may run into problems with,
both beetles.
both beetles and wax moth, so that's why in the winter, that's part of the reason why I'm running single deeps in the winter, because your winter over, to me, like if I have 5 to 7 frames of bees like 7 frames of bees going into winter, I'm fine. I don't need any more than 7 frames of bees going into winter. And even 5, I'm not thrilled about, but I feel like that colony is going to be able to make it in a single deep. It's going to look small in a double deep, 5 frames of bees, but in a single deep, I think they're okay, And I changed my mind a little bit on this from seeing what happened at the apiary last year, with the flood and really having hives having the nukes, the queen mating nukes that basically got dead. All the brood got killed September 1st. So we basically treated and feed those bees, and maybe we got those bees up to 3 frames of bees, and we overwintered them in a single bee nuke box with emergency feed on top, insulation on top, and 10 out of 11 of those colonies survived the winter. So it made me think like, and there's other people running smaller hives through the winter, but I'm not telling people what to do. It's just a different way to think about it. But the hive size management is crucial to having healthy hives. Jeff Eckel, our inspector, says that. He always says your bees like to be crowded. If your bees aren't crowded, make them crowded, and they're going to be a lot healthier for that. So anyway.
We talked about how to manage the humidity and concentration that may occur.
So the hives are going to create, moisture, right? Because water vapor from carbohydrate metabolism. I don't know the equation, but like carbohydrate plus something equals, CO2,
Water,
H2O, right? So you're going to have water vapor in the winter, right? So the challenge with water vapor is you don't want the water vapor coming up, hitting a cold top, and then dropping back down on the bees, right? Because that's going to make bees, you don't want to be wet in the winter. Bad enough to be cold, but cold and wet is worse than cold. So you got to deal somehow with that water vapor, right? So one of the things that I think everybody does, and there's probably going to be no one who disagrees with this, is to put insulation on the top of the hive, right? So insulation on the top of the hive is going to keep that top of the hive not cold. So when the water vapor comes up, it doesn't condensate and drip back on the bees, right? Anyone disagree with that?
No, that's the most important thing, the insulation.
Right.
Much
So
more important than not the outside.
yeah, insulation. If you don't have insulation on your hives, at the top of your hives, you're probably making a mistake. I don't routinely say you're making a mistake because I'm careful because there's a lot of unknowns, but that's probably a mistake. So you got to have insulation on the top of your hive. Some people, I've started putting insulation in my telescope and cover so it's there year round. That it's already built into the telescope and cover, so I don't need to remember to put it on and put it off and store it. It's there all the time. So those of you who are, and they sell them, they sell insulated telescope and covers, and maybe they're worth the extra money. And if you're a woodworker, you can clearly make them and build the insulation right at the top and not need to remember to do it. So that's number one. Number two is whether or not you need top ventilation, whether or not you need ventilation at the top of the hive, right? So do you want to put a 5/8 inch hole at the top of the hive so some of the water vapor can go out the top of the hive? So that used to be standard recommendation, is to have a top ventilation. So you kind of, so the water vapor would come out and not come back on the beads, okay? And that used to be what people did. And there was some evidence last year that maybe you could do, maybe the colony would do just as well with insulation on the top, but no top ventilation. Because the problem with the top ventilation is also heat loss, right? So obviously it makes sense. Not only is the water vapor coming out, but the heat's coming out. And you're going to ask that colony to generate more heat to compensate for the heat loss that's going at the top of the hive. So what do you say? You're gonna, I think,
I'm not gonna ventilate anymore.
I'm not.
One,
Yeah, I'm
one
good. I
little,
can pick up
like
way.
the inner cover ventilation, that's it. Because I presented, I know it was in a PowerPoint, so. it must
people
have
were
been
talking
during the
about that
winter.
on Beach Chat last night.
Oh, okay. So there were some, I've read many articles in Bee Culture and American Journal of Beekeeping, and I've seen a lot of discussion on it. And then there was some data where a guy put temperature probes in the hive and measured heat. And there was a misleading experiment way back when the guy put temperature probes at the top of the hive and said there's no difference between an insulated and an uninsulated hive. He was right, because he only measured at the top. But when you put temperature probes all the way down on the bottom, there's a big, big difference. So the most important thing is to put the insulation on the top and minimize the airflow at the top, minimize the ventilation at the top, because the warm air just rises and whooshes out. And when it whooshes out, it tends to suck more cold air out. So you get a chimney effect. And that's what you want to avoid. So I'm going to just have minimal high ventilation this year.
So you still have moisture, right? If it doesn't,
So if the moisture
have
comes
enough-
down and then it sort of goes down the sides of the hive.
Yeah,
So it
it'll
doesn't,
condense on maybe the outside where if it's not insulated.
and
But
not
if
on
you
the
have
top.
insulation on the top, it won't condense on the top and then rain down on the bees.
so I hear a lot of people talking about putting things to absorb that moisture and the bees can then draw from that.
Yeah,
So what are some?
I put stuff on top, old socks, blankets.
Oh, okay.
So some people will have a quilt box, or they'll have a box below the insulation board where they'll put blankets or socks or other material that will absorb that moisture. So the bees can come up and suck on it. I don't know if that's necessary or not, but because the bees need the moisture and they'll use that moisture to consume the honey.
Yeah.
So I think when you put insulation on the top, it comes down and condensates on the sidewall.
So it's done insulate, so it'll condensate on the side.
Correct.
And then they can use it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So last year, I ran 50% of my hives with top ventilation and 50% of my hives without top ventilation, and saw no difference in winter survival either way. So
Any molding inside the house?
molding?
Yeah.
No.
I mean, is that a thing? Have you heard that?
Molding?
Not a problem.
Mold. I guess, again, if you have too much space, right? Too much space and not enough bees, I guess you could have a mold problem at the top of your hive. But I've not seen mold.
But not if you have the insulation on. If you have the insulation on, shouldn't have any mold.
This is.
But if the water runs down the sides, make sure you have bottom ventilation.
And I close out, if you're running
Right now.
screen bottom boards, I close them off in the winter too. Again, they say that doesn't make a difference, but especially, it makes a difference if you have a lot of wind and that wind is sort of getting into the hive, but I close off all my screen bottom boards. That's like, why do I want to make the bees generate more heat? Like, why do I want to run my heater more than I need to run my heater?
It'll kill the beetle.
What, the heater? I'm trying to figure that out. If you ever wish to kill beetles, let me know. I'm interested. I just let a few loose this morning. Did I guess?
Just tape it off at the screen bottom board?
I just put the whiteboard in. Just put your whiteboard in, or put a sheet of plywood below it, or put something below it. so that the cold air is not rushing through. I'm trying to get the hives to consume as little food as possible in the winter, because I'm just lazy and I don't feel like spending my money on sugar or water, honestly. So my mind is on to, let's see if I can get my hive to consume as little as possible.
Yeah, I'm exactly the opposite. I
Correct.
want to consume as much as possible and then be very big and honey producers in the spring. They're two different approaches.
You know, and my counter argument to that is like, okay, you're gonna feed your bees in September, you're gonna build your winter clusters up to be a big size, right? So you're gonna I'm gonna be okay with 7 frames of bees. Keith's probably got 14 or 15 frames of bees right now. His bees are gonna consume more sugar water than my bees are, just because they're bigger, right? So the bigger cluster is gonna consume more food. He's gonna have a bigger cluster in March than me, for sure. And not him, but most people, you have a bigger cluster in March. Come April, you're gonna swarm. My 5 frames of bees are building up, and I'm gonna have a hive full of bees May 1st when it matters.
But I'm harvesting honey in April. So
Yeah.
So I think again, it's two different ways to think about how am I gonna manage my bees, and I think, again, I don't, there's pluses and minuses to both. Obviously, we both have 90% overwinter survival, so, and we've both done that for multiple years now, so it's possible to have a 90% overwinter survival, running a double deep with a medium and 110 or 20 pounds with big clusters, and it's also you could run a single deep and smaller. It's
whatever your management technique.
whatever your management
The
technique
main
is.
thing is to get them to survive.
Right.
Yeah, and I want to get the purple dead nettle harvest, which is beautiful early April, really, really nice.
One other thing Jack reminded me that you can do to keep your hives cozy in the winter is to put up a windbreak.
Oh, yeah.
So you can stack hay bales or just a curtain of maybe burlap bags. You want to put it to the windward side of the hive. So for me, most of the prevailing wind comes from the west, so I'd stick it on the west side of the hives. Unless you have it in a nice little area where you have a hedgerow that blocks the wind, you might benefit from a windbreak.
So we're gonna.
Yes, question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
One
Yes,
more
question.
question about that
Absolutely.
a little bit. Winter configurations, different schools of thought. Let's say you're overwintering in 2 deep. And you go in there and you've got some brood, you've got honey, you've got some empty frames. Where should you move that, or should you move that stuff?
Yeah, move the brood down and the honey up and the empty frames to the outside,
Oh, sure.
for sure. The other thing is, if you get a warm day in, December or January, like 50 degrees, might want to look in there and see how they're doing on consuming honey in that top deep. If they've eaten all the honey on the inside, you might have to move frames from the outside closer to the cluster, because they will not move sideways and go up and get the honey. So they can starve if they've consumed like 4 frames in the middle and there are 2 on the edges. They won't go there because the cluster wants to stay in the
That's a
middle.
small cluster, big cluster.
Big cluster is going to be eating all that stuff. But that's just something to keep in mind as you're trying to keep an eye on if your queen is starting to lay in January. Want to make sure they have enough food in the middle.
Aren't you concerned about the empty space? So if I have 2 deeps, but I only have, say, I don't know, 13, 14 frames of bees and honey and whatever. The concern is like, well, it's not big enough to really have 2 deep going into the winter because all they have to do is, but it's, what am I gonna do with the extra frames of good stuff, right? That I mean, leave the big.
The extra frames of good stuff or empty
I
stuff?
got, I keep all, obviously we keep all the brood frames. But say I got, the honey, that's not enough for me to justify going 2 deep because I got.
Oh, you can overwinter in a single deep. Yeah, you can consolidate. In fact, that might be better because the cluster has to create a thermal mass to keep the hive alive. And if you're spreading it out over 2 deeps, that's maybe not beneficial for a smaller cluster because they have to heat up all that space. So if you can consolidate them and have a big cluster in one deep, that's going to be better than a little cluster in two deeps. They just simply can't heat that space.
I don't know if I'd go down to one deep at this point. What I'd probably do is feed your feed a little bit more. If you're running a double deep, you have to be framed out some more feed on for the next 2 weeks.
But again, it's the population, it's the population.
Yeah, I
They
don't
want a
yeah.
big cluster.
So George, remember that medium hive that we looked at last year?
Sure.
So George came over to my house. I had a 3 medium hive. One was just empty, took it off, okay. There was basically nothing in the second one as well. And there were maybe 5 frames of bees in the bottom medium. So we looked at it and said, well, it's probably not gonna make it through the winter. Threw an inner cover on top of that medium, threw another medium on top, put some stores in there. Didn't think it was gonna make it through, opened it up in April. Wow, there's the queen. This thing has got brood all over the place, and it was actually most productive hive, probably 135 pounds of honey out of it. Like, really, it was a single medium. So bees don't read the same books we do. And there's a lot of studies going on where people are looking at not the big hives that make it through, but it's the smaller, more compact hives that don't use up all the resource. So,
You learn by doing, right? And this fine tuning of management that we're discussing about usually doesn't come to a new beekeeper, right? You've got to be beekeeping for a few years and have your own objectives and your own thoughts and your own learnings before you just decide, But I think in general, a double deep, but sounds like it only has a few empty frames should be fine. I would not be tearing that apart right now and trying to mess with it. Maybe feed it a little bit more, put some food above on the top. So when the bees move up, they'll have something over their head. And it sounds like you'll be fine. The number 1, number 2, and number 3 reason why bees don't survive the winter is bees. So if you've been good about your mites, and checking your mites and treating your mites, your hive will probably be fine over the winter. And then they need some food. They need some food in February. You're okay until February. Your hives are probably not going, unless you've been like a honey whore and took every single frame of honey out of that hive. Your hive's going to be okay until February, when the brood starts. They're not going to consume much between now and February. In February, you have to worry a little bit, when they start to brood up and the temperature goes up and the weather gets a little iffy and they think it's spring, but it's not spring, then worry. Right now, relax. If you've treated your mites, relax. You'll be fine. So we're gonna go to break. We got a few last minute things before we adjourn for the day. Jack has an announcement of some kind. I forgot what Jack wanted to talk about, but Jack wanted to talk about something. Oh yeah, the Whole Foods bee thing.
So you probably saw through newsletter or maybe somewhere else that for the last several years, Kimberton Whole Foods, which is a franchisee of Whole Foods, I think they own 5 of the stores. They allow their employees every month to pick a charity of the month, and then they do a rounding up at the register program where they ask any customer if they want to round their purchase up to the next dollar. For the last at least 4 years, Kimberton Whole Foods has chosen Chester County Beekeepers Association in one of their stores as the charity for the month of September. This September, it was the Malvern store. So for the entire month of Malvern, the customers at that store rounded their purchase up for a total of $2,657. Kimberton Whole Foods then matched that. So they gave us a check for about just under $5,700. So thanks to Kimberton Whole Foods and our customers.
Oh, stop it now. So what are we gonna do? Where's the party?
We just had it.
So cool. We're gonna do some good with that money, I think. So it's all good.
That's to save the bees.
That's the Save the Bees money. So anyone got any so after the meeting, we're gonna end. And I think a few of us are gonna head over to the apiary. So if anybody wants to join us at the apiary, which is 651 Brandywine Drive, We're gonna feed some of the mating boxes, maybe do a few mic counts on some hives I forgot to treat. And see what's going on over there, and an opportunity to sort of get yourself into some bees and learn. If anybody wants to join us, works great. Anyone got any show and tell? This thing's awesome, actually. It's now got a little piece of parachute cord between the hive tool and this, which is kind of cool because this gives it a little bit of flexibility, so you're not always like pulling out the wires. So I love it. I haven't lost it since I did this, so got to be worth something. Anyone use these mini hive tools? No, they work. They're really nice when you're in the hive, and you're just sort of moving frames around to have a smaller in your hand. They're a little rough this time of year when you're trying to break boxes and separate the honey supers from the other boxes. These little ones aren't quite as much leverage, but when you're in a hive moving frames, works really nice. So this is just a key, one of the key card things, with a metal thing, and there's a little 1/8" paracord. So it's great because I just hook it to and it's always there, and I never put it down and never lose it. So this is like a homemade jobber, so you can do the same thing. No, Ed's not here. He made the little mini hive tool, and it's really nice. Actually, it's a lot nicer than the mini ones they sell on Amazon. What? Ed made this. Ed took a big hive tool and they sell minis on Amazon. Yeah, they're not as good. Anyway, but there you go. That's any other last minute questions before we adjourn? We will see everybody at the November. Oh, no more new kid at the November meeting. Please come. Please consider being president or on the board. We definitely need people to serve.
Or a committee lead.
Or a committee lead. Thanks, guys. See y'all at the apiary.